Hello. Okay, great, works. So welcome to the Independence of the Judiciary panel. The main topic of our panel today is, as you already know, the independence of the judiciary in Poland. I would now like to briefly introduce our speakers for today. So we have Judge Igor Tuleya on the very left. He was suspended from his judicial duties in November 2020 and his immunity was lifted as he was for the alleged breach of the secrecy of the investigation. He's also an active member of Judicial, organization of Polish judges. Then we have Dariusz Mazur, a criminal court judge from Krakow. He was awarded the European Judge of the Year in 2015 and honor for engaging in the international community in the rule of law. We also have Tijn van Osch, a senior judge in the Court of Appeal of Arnhem-Leeuwarden, chair of the international community of NVR, and the representative on the International Association of Judges. Now I would like to ask our speakers to briefly introduce themselves, and we'll move on to the main debate of today as well. Maybe Igor, if I may ask.
I want to, yesterday my English went to high level, but I help. Okay.
Yeah, I will be translating.
Okay, thank you.
Judge Mazur.
Okay. Igor Tuleya, jestem sędzią w Sądzie Okręgowym w Warszawie, członkiem Stowarzyszenia Justicja. Spróbuję odpowiedzieć na wszystkie wasze pytania. Jestem zaszczycony, że mogę tutaj być.
Okay, so this is Judge Tuleya. He is a judge at a regional court in Warsaw. He's very pleased to be here and will do his best to answer all of your questions. He's also a member of Judicial organization in Poland.
Thank you very much. Judge Mazur.
First of all, I'm a judge, but temporarily, probably I'm a spokesperson of the second largest association of judges in Poland, which is called TEMIS, which is much, much smaller than Justicia, but we are trying to do our best in defense of the rule of law in Poland, and I strongly believe that we will win.
And then the last one, Judge van Osch.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Nie moje po polsku. You understand? I don't speak Polish.
Yes, I understood, but you were close to Polish. Yeah. With soft pronunciation, but okay.
I have to learn.
Yeah.
I thank you very much.
Czechish accent, but okay.
Okay. Yes, we have to present ourselves. I'm a judge in Court of Appeal, but I'm here because I'm also the chair of the Dutch Association of Judges, the International Committee of the Dutch Association of Judges, the NVVR as we call it. I've been that since only this summer, but I'm a member of the committee for several years already. And in the committee, Poland is a key issue for us. And now I tell you something that you think, why do you tell this? But I tell it anyway. This weekend, we celebrate and commemorate in the Netherlands the liberation of the Netherlands in 1944. There was a big Allied operation in the
General
east.
Maczek.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it was called Market Garden. It was in Arnhem. At the bridge.
Sosabowski.
Yes, General Sosabowski. And that were British troops, but what not many people know, that also Polish troops attended the fights. And in my hometown, on the 15th of September 1944, the first independent brigade from General Sosabowski landed by their parachutes and they liberated my hometown. That was 77 years ago. And so it's an honor for me to be here. Maybe you can show the photos. That's the statue of General Sosabowski in our town. And that is the place, we call it, it's a central place in the city. It's called Plak Polski. And it's the airborne, you know it. Now, and it's an honor to be here because 77 years ago we were under attack and the Polish came to help us. And now you are under attack not by a foreign country as them, but also. And I think it's now the moment for the rest of the world to stand up for the Polish colleagues.
We really appreciate your engagement. The same words were told by Mr. Timmermans and Mr. Kersterk. And for me, it is something very special because I'm very much interested in history. And for many years, I thought that this sacrifice of Polish soldiers fighting in the West was a lot of wasted blood because after the Second World War, we were under the Soviet influence, to say the least, and even when there was this parade of victory in London, Polish troops were not invited in order not to make Mr. Stalin nervous. So I thought that it was a kind of wasted blood, but then after many, many years, it turns out that it's the inspiration for some very important people to defend Polish democracy, which is very unusual example of how strangely the history works.
Every year,
very positive
every year
example.
we have still that Polish parachute troops, old veterans, but also normal troops from this time. They come to our city. And they commemorate with us what happened 77 years ago.
Ja mogę dodać, że Holandia dzisiaj jest najbardziej aktywnym z państw europejskich w tej walce o praworządność w Polsce. My to widzimy nie tylko w takich relacjach jak dzisiaj, ale też w tej polityce międzynarodowej, która dzisiaj się rozgrywa w Europie i też choćby przedstawiciel Holandii zawsze jest bardzo aktywny przed Trybunałem Sprawiedliwości w Luksemburgu.
Okay, so Judge Tuleya is saying that Netherlands are one of the most active countries that are helping right now to defend the rule of law. And we can see it in the Luxembourg, and we can also see it here right now in this dialogue.
European Parliament.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It brings me to my first question of today. I will try not to take as much of the time to bring our audience an opportunity to ask their question. But how does assault on the judiciary in Poland looks like specifically? And how you as individuals working within the judiciary experienced these assaults?
To, co się dzieje w Polsce, tak naprawdę nie jest niczym odkrywczym.
The situation in Poland is not something new.
Powtarza się wariant nie tylko węgierski, ale też można powiedzieć, że turecki. My to wiemy, ponieważ mamy przyjaciół sędziów tureckich, którzy uciekli przed Erdoganem do Europy Zachodniej.
So we already see it in past years in Hungary or in Turkey when we could see judges being harassed.
W Polsce powtarza się pewna sekwencja zdarzeń.
We are basically repeating the same events, just in Poland.
Jak to wygląda instytucjonalnie, pewnie powie sędzia Mazur.
How it looks like in real life, it will be told by Judge Mazur.
Natomiast oczywiście istotne jest przejęcie mediów publicznych i mediów i uzależnienie mediów od rządu.
For the ruling party, it is important to take over free media and then to use them.
W tym ataku istotną rolę odgrywa propaganda.
In this attack on judges, the important part is played by propaganda.
Najczęściej zaczyna się od tego, że któryś z polityków partii rządzącej swoją wypowiedzią daje sygnał do ataku.
It's starting with a politician of the ruling party, which is giving a sign for others to attack.
To jest natychmiast powielane przez media rządowe, następnie przez anonimowych hejterów w mediach społecznościowych.
This is then repeated by media owned by governing party and then also repeated online in, for example, troll campaigns.
Może powiem taką ciekawostkę, że 2 lata temu doszło do takiej sytuacji, że minister sprawiedliwości Ziobro powołał zespół prokuratorów do ścigania anonimowego hejtu w sieci.
So the interesting fact is, like 2 years ago, Minister of Justice, Zbigniew Ziobro, created a troll campaign, which is composed of procurators and other officials, who are targeting right now the judges.
Zakomunikował to na konferencji zwołanej przed Ministerstwem Sprawiedliwości.
It was all started during the conference in the Ministry of Justice.
W tym samym czasie jego zastępca, wiceminister, kierował grupą hejterów.
In the same time, the Vice Minister of Justice was operating this troll farm.
Thank you.
Well, in systemic terms, there are 4 ways of intimidation of Polish judges. These are firstly disciplinary proceedings, secondly criminal proceedings, thirdly administrative repressions, and fourthly black PR campaign in the state-owned media. In terms of these disciplinary proceedings, we can say that in 2018, Polish government started a real witch hunt against the judges, in which the role of Holy Inquisition is played by the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court. The role of inquisitors is played by the Central Disciplinary Commissioners, prosecutors from the Internal Affairs Department of the State Prosecution Service, and politically loyal presidents of courts. And the role of the Hammer of the Witches is played by the Mazur Act, which prohibits judges from questioning the legal status of the disciplinary chamber, neo-national council of the judiciary, and the judges appointed with its participation under the threat of professional death. So this disciplinary means are prevailing. There was entire new disciplinary system created in Poland, which is absolutely subordinated to the Minister of Justice, who appointed the main disciplinary commissioners, who appointed the judges of first instance disciplinary courts, who can make an objection to any kind of decision undertaken in this proceeding, who can initiate this proceeding, and so on and so on. In terms of criminal proceedings, the Special Internal Affairs Department of the Public Prosecution Office was created at the very top of the institutional structure, so it is directly subordinated to the Minister of Justice, and it creates the cases on the basis of completely absurd criminal charges, and on the basis of the motion of this special unit, Judge Tuleya was suspended, his immunity was revealed. In terms of administrative repressions, the ruling camp empowered Polish Minister of Justice, General Prosecutor Public, to appoint all presidents and vice presidents of Polish courts without any influence of judicial self-government on the basis of his entirely arbitrary decisions. And these are the real servants of the Minister of Justice, Prosecutor General, and they apply in respect of defiant judges some administrative repressions, like, for example, unjustified transfer of judges between divisions, deteriorating of their working conditions by depriving them of proper administrative staff, refusing agreements for additional educationary work or stuff like that. And, of course, such activities of the presidents of court in the respect of judges prepare the ground for proper disciplinary proceedings, because if you are overloaded with the case number and deprived of proper help, administrative help, then you are prone to commit a kind of judicial error. And last but not least, we are facing the very massive black PR campaign in state-owned media. The most recognized part of this campaign was so-called Billboard Campaign against the Judiciary. It was in September 2018 as a kind of preparation for the next stage of the pseudo-reform. There was thousands of huge billboards around the entire Poland. There was also internet and TV part of this campaign. This campaign described judges in the worst possible ways, giving examples of disciplinary proceedings against judges. The problem is that some of these examples were true, but only a small part. Some were completely false, and some were manipulated. For example, it was told that the judge has stolen trousers from the shop, and the fact by itself has happened, but they didn't mention that the judge was for many years retired, and that the former judge at this moment was mentally ill. That was not mentioned. And that was this kind of black PR propaganda. And one of the judges of the Krakow Court of Appeal very aptly commented this phenomenon, that the situation in which one of the branches of the state power instigates negative black PR propaganda and pays for it against another branch of power of the same country is so peculiar that even Monty Python or Orwell wouldn't come up with that. And that's absolutely true. It's the pure invention of Law and Justice, such kind of campaign, and you can't find any examples of such activity. And as I said, this was preparing the ground for next stage of the pseudo-reforms, which meant at that time taking control over the Supreme Court. That's our set reality, which is so absurd that every day when I wake up in the morning for the recent 5 years, my first thought is it has to be a nightmare. It can't be true.
Thank you very much, maybe.
Thank you very much. Very impressive. I will keep it short. What I do remember well, when I was at a meeting of the International Association of Judges a few years ago, it was at the end, it was just a year after Poland had a new government. And one of the members of the Polish delegation, member of Judicial, we spoke at the coffee break, just like here, and we know each other for years, so we could talk. And then he said, Matthäus, I couldn't have thought a year ago what has happened in 1 year. We thought the laws and the Constitution would protect us as judges, but it was not true. That was only the beginning, what happened there. And when I heard that, I later thought, when it happens in Poland, it can happen everywhere. It can happen also in the Netherlands. When the majority of parliament that's what happened in Poland, as I understood. When the majority of parliament seeks for another way, then it can happen. And that is also the problem in every country. And so we have to be prepared everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We were wondering, were you prepared for the reactions of the people around you? I mean, in the sense, you've probably come across many different people having many different opinions about what you're doing in the context of the judiciary. And what were the most common misconceptions about your actions for the fight for the rule of law? And how do you handle those misconceptions, and how do you try to fight those? And also, as another question, the most, I would say, controversial one, have your interests ever been questioned?
Rzeczywiście społeczeństwo polskie jest podzielone, ale nasi przeciwnicy praworządności to tak naprawdę ofiary tej propagandy rządowej. Ja się spotykam z różnymi głosami z tego powodu, że po mieście, po Warszawie poruszam się komunikacją miejską i mniej więcej te głosy przeciwników i głosy, które dają wsparcie sędziom, rozkładają się 50-50. To jest po połowie.
So, Judge Tuleya is saying that Polish society, like the country, is divided because most of the people are under the influence of propaganda. As he's meeting with a lot of negative comments and opinions because he's traveling by public transportation. So.
Jestem po prostu zaczepiany na ulicy i z niektórymi osobami da się nawiązać dialog, rozmowę i można próbować przekonać ich do swoich racji. Natomiast ze znaczną częścią tych osób jakikolwiek dialog jest niemożliwy.
So sometimes he's approached by people on the street, and sometimes it's really possible to enter into dialogue with them and to convince them and to show them how it is in reality. But sometimes it's really hard because they are like brainwashed by propaganda. So it's really hard to enter into dialogue with them.
Odnoszę wrażenie, że z roku na rok reakcje naszych przeciwników są coraz bardziej brutalniejsze, że zaczynało się to od jakiejś agresji werbalnej, natomiast też dzisiaj często dochodzi do takiej agresji wręcz fizycznej.
Okay, so year by year, the reaction of the people that so basically year by year, like the reaction of society is getting worse and worse. Last year, for example, we had like verbal attacks, but now they are like physical attacks.
Stowarzyszenia sędziowskie duży akcent, Temis i Justicja duży akcent kładą właśnie na edukację, o której na festiwalu dużo się mówi. To są między innymi spotkania z młodzieżą w szkołach, aczkolwiek dzisiaj jest to tak naprawdę niemożliwe, ponieważ minister edukacji zabronił takich zajęć edukacyjnych, ale sędziowie uczestniczą i w festiwalach rockowych. Oczywiście nie gramy na instrumentach, tylko prowadzimy jakieś warsztaty edukacyjne i organizujemy rozmaite kafejki prawne i spotkania z obywatelami.
Okay, so judges and judicial organization right now are trying to educate the people, usually by taking part in civil organization and initiatives or in the rock festivals, and there they're trying to educate the people, but they also used to do that in schools, but right now because of the Minister of Education it's really hard and it's impossible to educate people inside the schools.
I oczywiście staramy się dawać jakiś przykład. Ja na przykład, dobry przykład. I tak, yesterday my English was very poor, today is very good.
So judges themselves are trying to set the example, and for example, by taking part in initiatives like this. Yeah, thank you.
If I may say a few words about the forms of judicial resistance in Poland, because we can truly say that such phenomenon exists in Poland and it is even developing. So here is the list of these main forms of our resistance. We organize protests, we comment the situation in the independent media, we organize conferences, seminars, we are disseminating leaflets, posters, badges concerning situation of Polish judiciary. We help persecuted judges who face politically motivated disciplinary proceedings. And of course, we adopt protesting resolutions, appeals, statements of the judicial associations, and we participate in different international activities. Participation in the Festival of the Rule of Law is one of the examples. Here are some pictures from the forms of judicial resistance. This is the wave of protests which took part in the middle of 2017, which in fact hampered for a longer time this devastation of the system of the judiciary, because it forced President Duda to veto initial bills in this respect. Of course, it was not like that the judges were protesting, but it was our idea of the candle of lights around the courts, and somehow it's developed among the society. In the top moment, 2 million people were protesting. Here is the protest at the Wrocław Market Square. People are demanding veto from the President Duda. Here is the picture from the March of 1,000 Ropes. You've seen the film about this. Judge Tuleya was suspended 18 November 2020, and since that time, every month in many Polish courts, especially in court in Krakow, there is a demonstration of support for Judge Tuleya and other persecuted judges, and here is the picture from one of these protests. Usually about 100 of Krakow court takes part in it, and it is on the stairs of the Court of Appeal in Krakow. Here is the same kind of protest inside the court building in Krakow, just opposite of the main entrance. Here is a so-called bench protest. When the president of our court refused us to call the assembly of judges in order to adopt protesting resolutions, we called assembly on ourselves, because there was 100 judges or more than 100 who came. It was difficult to talk to them without being granted a big room, so I stand on the bench, and it was, for sometimes it was a kind of symbol of judicial resistance, because it was transmitted by the TV. Here is the protest on the day of entry into force of the Mazur law. We tried to show it to Polish judges, Polish society, and also to international community. And the commenting on the independent media for the spokesperson of judges or judge so much engaged as Judge Tuleya is almost everyday practice. There are weeks in which I, for 4 times, comment different strange movements of the government and of the parliament in respect of the judiciary. Here are the pictures from independent channel of TVN. Some judges make artistic activities, especially the one is very talented, and here is a sample of his activity. So one person speaks to another, what does the independence of judge in Poland looks like? And another person answers, a judge cannot challenge executive, but executive has methods to challenge a judge. Here is one of the first conferences, the conference in which took part 1,000 judges from entire Poland. It took place at the beginning of in September 2016. You can see the empty chairs in the first row. We invited the President of Poland, the Minister of Justice, the Marshal of the Sejm, but they never talk with the judiciary. This current ruling camp always refused to take part in any kind of discussion. Here is the picture from another big conference from March 2017. People are carrying Polish constitution and demand for obeying it. This is another idea, so-called Tour de Konstytucja. Igor is one of the main actors. They travel around Poland for a few months and they talk with people about the Constitution, about the meaning of the partiality, independence of courts. Here is an example of one of the professional events we organized in Krakow with participation of Krakow Lawyers Bar, with participation of Lydia in this event, and Kesterk, among others, took part in this. Here is the symbol of judicial resistance. Here is the poster demanding reinstatement of suspended judges to the profession. Here is another protest in front of Krakow court. All judges has this Konstytucja t-shirt, so we can see an army of the rule of law in action. And of course, we help persecuted judges who face politically motivated disciplinary proceedings. There are different ways of help for these judges. We adopt protesting resolutions. We take supporting photos. We provide persecuted judges with professional defenders in disciplinary proceedings. In disciplinary proceedings, it is possible to participate as a counsel of the defense, not only for advocates, but also for judges. Currently, I'm defending 4 judges and 1 public prosecutor in disciplinary proceedings. Another interesting form of support for persecuted judges is an activity which we call self-denunciation. For example, at the end of 2020, there was big action in Krakow Regional Court with Judicial Association within the building, and only me and my colleague were reported to the disciplinary commissioner to instigate disciplinary action in respect of us, because we are perceived as a kind of leaders. And then soon the rest of judges who hang the posters make a statement to the president of court. We also took part in this action, and they make a signature down there and they submitted it to the president of court. We call this kind of activity self-denunciation. Here is an example of this supporting photos for persecuted judges. Every 18th day of the month in Krakow, we do a big billboard action. We put the posters everywhere in the city where it is possible. We do it personally, as we don't have resources to pay someone. We hired a car which is going around the city with such a big poster carrying. We hired some big electronic billboards in the city for such action. We put the big letters on the front wall of the court in order to let entering people to see what is going on in Krakow court. The inscriptions are, "We support Igor." It's enough intimidation of judges, and we support other judges who are repressed. And then the director of courts walks and takes off our inscriptions, but then we repeat. Here is another action. Igor, Tuleya, you will never walk alone. I can see that it is from Middle Poland, because It is very well organized. We in Krakow are never able to make such a nice writings, such a clear messages. Here are another actions of this kind: support for Judge Wróbel, the prominent old judge of the Supreme Court who is under fire for a long time. This is this famous poster which we hanged in our court, which is the reason of one of my disciplinary proceedings, and this action of support of my colleagues. And of course, we adopt many protesting resolutions. We take part in international activities. We maintain the website in English, both Justicja and Temis, which inform about the situation of the judiciary. We took part in meetings with many EU officials. We do whatever is possible, and we are as much creative as we can in this respect.
Yes, we have a question, I believe, from the online audience.
So this is a question from Johannes, who is joining us online. He asks Judge Mazur, you said yesterday that in your estimation about 90% of Polish judges oppose the so-called judicial reforms. How does this opposition manifest itself beyond your and Judge Tuleya's brave examples?
Well, my presentation was devoted to this kind of activity. Sometimes when there is special repressive act against particular judge, there is, for example, there are demonstrations, for example, in front of 50 Polish courts. Sometimes it is one judge from the court, because in some courts there are just a few judges. Sometimes it is 100, like it is usually in Krakow. Some NGOs support our demonstrations, so there are some citizens taking part. Well, that's everything what I have shown on my picture. It is pretty hell of different kinds of activities. We try to introduce any kind, except for this, what I have mentioned. For example, we sent postcards with support for prosecuted judges or prosecutors, and there are many, many other activities which it is difficult to count this kind of actions. They are everyday practice in Polish judiciary for recent few years. Sometimes I wonder if I sacrifice more time for my professional activity, normal professional activity, or more for judicial resistance. And not to mention Igor, who is fully concentrated on judicial resistance as he is suspended as a judge. Sometimes I wish I would be suspended, because then I could put more effort in this activity. So such actions are, as suspension of judges, can be counter-effective from point of view of subordination of the judiciary.
And I have one question that is from me, which is that the justification that the Law of Justice Party uses to put forward these reforms is that the judiciary still has systems from the communist times. And I'm curious as to, as people who have worked in the Polish judicial system, what is your observation of this? And this is to both Judge Tuleya and Mazur.
Okay. No. Okay. This is another absurd, completely absurd kind of propaganda. The average age of Polish judge currently is between 42 and 43. So at the change of the system 32 years ago, the average Polish judge was 10. What kind of post-communist pact can be such a judge? How could he actively participate in communist activities? That's the first remark. Of course, this argument was raised especially during trials of taking control over Supreme Court, because naturally the justices of Supreme Court are the oldest part of Polish judiciary, and many of them started their career during the communist time. But it's not like that if judge was active judge during communist time, he was a part of oppression. It's rather the opposite. Most of judges tried to defend the activists of Solidarity, and of course some of them were not, but it was not a big part. And I can give you an example. In Polish Supreme Court there are about 90 judges, and when they tried to get rid of all of them in one day in the middle of 2017, they said that Polish Supreme Court needs decommunization. And nowadays, after 4 years since that time, there are pending 3 criminal proceedings against justices of the Supreme Court who are under the suspicion that they were cooperating in communist times. I know that one of these proceedings is completely absurd, because this judge was standing on his head in that times to defend the activists of opposition. But, if you raise the argument of decommunization and you are able merely to show that 3 out of 90 judges were somehow involved, for some part of these arguments are false, then what is the reason to get rid of the 87 remain judges from the Supreme Court? It's just a kind of completely absurd propaganda. The communists like bullshit.
Nie wiem, czy Darek powiedział, bo ten jego angielski akcent jest fatalny, że średnia wieku sędziów w Polsce to 42 lata.
So,
I've told this. But my poor accent didn't enable Igor to understand. Sorry, Igor. I must work on my English. I will do my best.
My Czech accent.
Yeah.
So basically, Judge Tuleya just told us that the age of the judges was reduced to 42 years old, being 20 to 40.
And
Only, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah.
And another interesting fact, according to current government, there are good communists and bad communists. For example, there is a man called Piotrowicz, who used to be a member of parliament of law and justice. He used to be a communist prosecutor in the communist times. He was very active prosecutor. There are proofs that he directed to the courts indictment acts against the activists of Solidarity, and they were sentenced afterwards. And he was not only the member of parliament representing law and justice, but he was a leader of parliamentary committee which pushed through the parliament all this pseudo-reform of justice. And 1 year ago, he became so-called justice of the Constitutional Tribunal, and he pushed through Constitutional Tribunal the anti-abortion law, and now he's going to decide about the conformity of Polish constitution with European law. And, well, he was granted the Medal of Honor for service for Polish People's Party in the communist times. And it doesn't interfere with the idea of decommunization at all.
Rządzący w swojej propagandzie i w swoich atakach posunęli się nawet do tego, że premier Morawiecki kilkakrotnie porównywał polskich sędziów do sędziów rządu Vichy we Francji w czasie okupacji hitlerowskiej. I to było o tyle oburzające, że rząd Vichy jest odpowiedzialny, czy wpisał się, czy brał udział w eksterminacji Żydów.
So Minister Morawiecki was comparing Polish judges to the judges from Vichy, which were sentencing the Jews.
Vichy regime
Yeah,
in France,
back from-
which were sentencing Jews, repressing them This is completely ungrounded comparisons, but it shows the level of governmental propaganda.
Yes.
Dziękuję, Darku, ale ja mam tłumacza.
My question was, so you just said that you kind of wished you were suspended so you would have more time to work on it, on the rule of law crisis as such. I was thinking, so Judge Tuleya is already...
It was a joke, partially.
I know. But so Judge Tuleya is already suspended, and you said you have disciplinary proceedings pending against you.
Yeah.
Do you think it's likely that you will be suspended? And if yes, why? And if not, why don't you think that's very likely?
Well, with autocratic regime, you never know what can touch them deeply enough. Maybe our participation in the Festival of the Rule of Law will be such factor. You never know. My recent disciplinary proceedings started like that on 15 July this year, the ECJ decided that the Polish disciplinary chamber is illegal in the light of EU law. And the next day, the Polish so-called first president of the Supreme Court, Ms. Manowska, I call her so-called first president because she was elected illegally, and secondly, she is the neo-judge, so she doesn't deserve to be called judge. But on the next day, after such decision of ECJ, she issued an order activating in full capacity the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court. It was so touching, such a direct, blatant breach of the EU law, of the ruling of the ECJ, that I commented to the media that what she has done is a kind of legal crime, that she doesn't deserve to serve in any kind of legal capacity as advocate, judge, notary public, and so on. And that's the reason of my third disciplinary proceedings. But firstly, I was called by the president of my court to the sitting of college of my court, and I was kindly proposed to withdraw my words, to deny it, and then I will have a chance to avoid the disciplinary proceedings.
Jeśli mogę dodać, jestem pewien, że sędzia Mazur zostanie zawieszony, ponieważ jest moim przyjacielem. Kiedyś doszło do takiej sytuacji, że też brałem udział w takim spotkaniu z obywatelami i sędzia, który prowadził to spotkanie, wszczęto wobec niego postępowanie dyscyplinarne. Pierwsze, był przesłuchiwany przez rzecznika dyscyplinarnego i po tym, jak opuścił to przesłuchanie, natychmiast wszczęto wobec niego drugie postępowanie dyscyplinarne, ponieważ jak dziennikarze się zapytali, jak przebiegało to pierwsze przesłuchanie u rzecznika dyscyplinarnego, to ten sędzia powiedział, że rzecznik musi być wyjątkowym idiotą, więc natychmiast wszczęto wobec niego drugie postępowanie.
Okay, so Judge Tuleya says that it's very likely that Judge Mazur will be suspended because he's his friend. And also there was a situation where Judge Tuleya and the other judge were having a meeting, and the other judge was also suspended, like had the disciplinary proceeding launched before the meeting, basically twice, because once he told that the guy that was interrogating him was an idiot. So then, extraordinary idiot. So, yeah.
So it is very, very dangerous in Poland to sit next to Igor Tuleya, especially closely. So maybe I will keep some more distance. It's contagious. No.
Hello. Yes, I have a question. So we've learned about your resistance and the resistance that is taking place in Poland, but also the support from other EU countries, maybe also from the international community. And sometimes you can see that governments are actually giving in to this pressure that is built up when there is more resistance from
a bigger community. Can you in Poland see that there might actually be, only if it's only on a small scale, that the government is being pressured by this resistance?
Yes, absolutely, we can see this. Without that outer pressure, any one of us wouldn't be a judge now. We would not only be suspended, but we would be removed long time ago. In fact, without the interim measure of ECJ from April 2019, the Polish Supreme Court would be entirely subordinated a long time ago after this reduction of the retirement age and increasement of the number of justices in the Supreme Court. And thanks to this interim decision, we still have the most of judges in the Supreme Court who are still independent. It is a small majority because they are about 50 fully independent judges and 40-something dependent, but still the independence prevails in Polish Supreme Court. And in fact, these decisions against the disciplinary chamber, they hamper the disciplinary proceedings. The government is wondering what to do to proceed further in order to take full grip over the judiciary and risk to lose the EU money, all this great support, or it is better to change something, to maneuver. So yes, it gives effects, for sure. Without this, we will be completely strangled a long time ago.
Maybe I may respond to that. I don't think that we have the possibilities that the Polish had 77 years ago, because they sent soldiers to Holland. And what they did was to uphold the rule of law in Holland, because under the occupation of the Nazis, there was no rule of law. And so it's very important that from outside Poland, there is pressure on the Polish government to uphold the rule of law. And that's why our Dutch organization, the Association of Judges in Holland, NWVR, but also working together with Lydia Heuveling, who's talking, the lady in red, who's talking this afternoon, and also the International Association of Judges. We, every time we meet and in between, when we get signals from what's happening in Poland, we try to make statements to international organizations, to the Polish government, to our own governments, to do something. And you cannot measure what helps and what not helps, but I think when you don't speak up, you have lost already. So you have to speak up. And let's hope it turns out to help in the end, because it's not finished yet, I think.
Definitely.
Let me add that is very active in several international communities and speaking out in the EIJ and trying to get them to even more be active. And Tijn is often there and is pressuring them to do even more. So we're really working closely together on different levels. And that's, for us, it's a way to really support our colleagues in Poland.
Hello. So I'm from Slovakia, and it's clear that you guys are getting a lot of support from the Netherlands. So I was wondering whether and how are your brothers and sisters, for instance, from the V4, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, if you have any ties to these countries, and if there are people who are actually helping you to protect the rule of law also from these countries, as we are supposed to be sort of together, fighting together for democracy.
Yesterday on the film on the March of 1,000 Ropes, you could see some participants from other countries of this march. There were representatives of, as far as I can remember, of 20 European countries, including representatives from Czech Republic, Slovakia, many other countries. Of course, the biggest delegation was from Netherlands. Absolutely, probably 12 people, I think. So it shows that there is an interest. And in fact, my engagement in the active protection of the rule of law in Poland started from the visit of my colleague from Czech Republic, the public prosecutor. We went to pub in Krakow, and when we were quite under the good moon, he said that he's main editor of the Czech magazine for lawyers, for public prosecutors, and it was in September 2016, and that they are very much afraid of what is going on in Poland, that it can be contagious, that it can happen in their country as well. And he asked me if I can prepare an article about the changes in Poland in order to be published in his magazine. Well, I was wondering for 30 seconds, and then I said, yes, I will do it. When I was working on it, I prepared 30 pages through the first month, and the last 5 pages took me another month because I was so much destroyed when I take it over the entire changes that I couldn't believe. And that was the beginning of my real activity. It was published afterwards in this magazine and on the English version on the website of University of Bonn. Then I understood what is going on in Poland. So the interest from colleagues from abroad helped me to understand the meaning of things happening in Poland.
Musimy zawsze pamiętać, że ten atak na praworządność w Polsce tak naprawdę jest atakiem na praworządność w Unii Europejskiej, czyli atakiem na praworządność w każdym z państw Unii Europejskiej.
So Judge Tuleya says that the attack on the rule of law in Poland is also like attacking against rule of law in Europe, as everything is interconnected, and what's happening in Poland is also affecting the European Union.
Polscy, holenderscy, duńscy sędziowie nie tylko są sędziami krajowymi w swoich państwach, ale też są sędziami europejskimi.
Polish, Danish, and Czech judges are not only national judges but also European judges. So.
Never know for whom the bell tolls.
So I'm curious to, as judges are supposed to be impartial and not politically engaged, where do you draw the line between being outspoken and involved in politics, and where is that line drawn? And this goes both ways too, because there's judges, of course, on the other side of the spectrum that are also quite political. I'm curious as to your opinions on that.
Też taki argument, który pojawia się, że działalność sędziów broniących praworządności jest działalnością polityczną, to tak naprawdę jest efekt tej propagandy i tego ataku ze strony partii rządzącej.
So the saying that judges are political is example of the attack on the judges.
Sędziowie publicznie, czy na demonstracjach, czy na mitingach z obywatelami mówią tak naprawdę, jeśli już, o prawie, o konstytucji, o sądownictwie.
Judges in their private capacity, when they are meeting in public, I'm sorry, I lost the point.
Że publicznie w prawie, konstytucji i sądownictwie nie mówimy o polityce.
When they are meeting, they are always talking about constitution and the law, not about politics. So they are strictly talking about constitution and law, never about the politics.
To, że sędziowie publicznie mówią o prawie i o konstytucji, rzeczywiście wywołuje furię, ponieważ nasze wypowiedzi są merytoryczne i zawodowym politykom trudno z nami dyskutować.
So when judges talk about the law and the constitution, ruling parties are furious because they do not have the knowledge.
Sędziowie mają nie tylko prawo, ale też obowiązek publicznie wypowiadać się na temat prawa.
Polish judges have a duty to speak about the law and the constitution.
Tego nie zabrania tak naprawdę ani polska konstytucja, ani też akty prawa europejskiego. Mamy całe orzecznictwo Europejskiego Trybunału Praw Człowieka, który akceptuje takie sytuacje, że sędziowie publicznie stają w obronie prawa.
It's totally legal to speak about the law. Sorry. So basically, it's totally legal to speak about the law and the constitution, and it's not forbidden, but national law, but also by the European law and also like European Convention of Human Rights. So basically, they are allowed to speak about the law.
Jeżeli wydaje się, że jeśli na przykład mamy reformę służby zdrowia, to osobami kompetentnymi, które w tej dziedzinie powinny zabrać głos, są lekarze.
When we have a reform about medical workers, medical workers should be allowed to say something about it, and they should be the ones to decide on it.
Jeżeli reformuje się sądy, wydaje się, że prawo zajęcia stanowiska mają sędziowie.
When we are reforming the judicial system, the judges should be the one to decide on it and have something to say about it.
W Polsce partia rządząca nazywa politykami wszystkie grupy społeczne, które mają odwagę dyskutować z rządzącymi.
So in Poland, the groups of society that are concerned and brave enough to speak up are usually called the politicians, which they are not.
Dla rządzących politykami są nauczyciele, lekarze, nie tylko sędziowie, rolnicy.
So the ruling party says that politicians are, for example, judges, doctors, and teachers who are willing to speak up.
In purely technical, general terms, every kind of activity which is directed to the large groups of people is a politics. So in this sense, our activity concentrated on defense of rule of law is a kind of politics. But it's not like that we came to politicians to take over their power. It's just the opposite. The politicians came to us to take over our independence. Our action is an action of self-defense. However, we are not defending ourselves. Almost every day, we are tempted by the ruling camp to take their positions. Every judge who agrees for this attack on the rule of law is advanced, he's promoted, he's granted additional money. When the new president of my regional court was nominated by the Minister of Justice on the second day of her office, she made a meeting with me and proposed me the position in the Ministry of Justice. So it's not like that by these actions we are defending ourselves. We could take benefits and relax, but we are defending the society against such abuse of power, which always happens when the system of checks and balances is dismantled. It's our professional duty after taking the judicial oath. We promise to defend the constitution and the rule of law in Poland. So we are in this war, we are a kind of soldiers on the first line of the battle.
Sorry for that, but we're slowly running out of time. So I would allow myself to wrap up the debate by one last question. I would ask you to do a little thought experiment, I would say. How would you say what could prompt assaults on the rule of law in the Netherlands? And how do you think that assault could have happened?
For me, I presume.
Yes, to all the panelists, but especially for you.
Thank you. 36 years ago, the United Nations adopted the basic principles of the independence of the judiciary. And the Netherlands has place 5 on the global index, on the rule of law index from last year. So we are high up.
Good for you.
Good for you. Still. But nevertheless, it can change. And what we have seen, as I said, it's what in Poland happened was a question of the majority of the parliament. And in Holland, we see that there are parties in the parliament who don't like the system as it goes now. One of the leader of one of the parties is himself is convicted for group insult to the Moroccan people, and that decision was upheld by our Supreme Court last year, I think. And his comment, he's always on Twitter, comment on Twitter was, the Netherlands is corrupt and the rule of law is bankrupt. I will not care about the decision of the Supreme Court and continue to speak the truth. Yes, those are very hard words for a politician to say, because my neighbor spoke about the checks and balances. We have the trias politica, 3 powers. We have to be in some, what do you call it?
Balance.
Balance, yes, that's the word I saw. I look for.
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium, yes. So there are more political people in the parliament who don't like it. There was one member of parliament. He last year we had the appointment of the new president of our Supreme Court. And then there was a debate in the parliament about what kind of profile should the new president have. And from that party came the meaning, you need a judge that don't go with all the modern stuff like climate rights from other people. And as you know, the Dutch Supreme Court ruled a few years ago about Urgenda, climate change case, was very famous. And they said, you need a president that stops that.
Bullshit.
Sorry?
Bullshit.
Bullshit. Okay. But he didn't succeed in that trying, but maybe it comes back. And then that's the problem. Our independence must be guaranteed by the procedures in our system. And as our president of our Dutch Association said in the papers last time, there is no clear lock to prevent political appointments of judges in the Netherlands. We need a new balance. And I can only agree with his statement. As I said, what can happen in Poland can happen everywhere. So I'm not afraid, but we have to be prepared. And behind this table, there are people who are twice your age. More than twice, maybe. I speak for myself. But it is in your hands in the future to uphold the system and uphold what is important. And as my colleague just said, they tried to to silence him by offering him a new job or more money or something like that, promotion. He didn't do that. That's very good. But it's a very difficult decision for yourself and for the people around you. So I think that's what is your task in the future, to uphold the system, not only in Poland or in the Netherlands, but you come from several countries, I heard from the organization. In your own system, do the same.
But to uphold the system doesn't mean to freeze the existing system, because the system has to adapt to the changes in the environment. So you should uphold the effectiveness of your system, independence of the judiciary in changing conditions, yes, on the decent basis and sincere basis.
Yes. I want to add 2 points shortly. One point is that we don't have in the Netherlands a fixed budget for the judiciary, and that is one thing we need, because now our budget is just a budget like all state ministries have, and it can be up and down, and it has to be fixed with some safeguards. And what we also don't have in the Netherlands is a constitutional court. Now, I won't say that in Poland it was the solution for your problems, but we don't even have a constitutional court. In the Netherlands system, the parliament decides when there's a discussion, like last week. You know, this week 2 ministers stepped down, other ministers stepped in, and the question was, can they be, again, still be a member of parliament? And then we had to decide that. We don't have a constitutional court, so parliament themselves had to decide that. And in the checks and balances, you can ask yourself, is that a good system? In the past, we did with this thing, that's a good system. We don't need a constitutional court. But maybe we are changing now.
Tijn, may I add something? We have something, and that's hope. And hope, because there is all these young people, and they say it's our rule of law. And I think this is the best thing I've ever met, and I think we judges from the NPVR should be glad to see all these young people defending our rule of law.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, I would like to wrap up the discussion today. And thank you very much for caring about our rule of law, essentially, and being there and educating yourself on the topic and engaging. So if you want to engage even more, I would like to invite you to the writing booth on the other side of the place. And yeah, thank you very much. And I'm asking for a very loud applause for our guests.
May I? I don't want to disturb your lunch, but I want to say one thing more, and that we follow a lot of countries, Poland, Hungary, but also for a long time Turkey. And as you know, in Turkey is not good, to put it mildly. In Turkey are as many judges in prison as Holland has judges. It's not to, you cannot imagine that, but that's what happens in Turkey. And the president of the Turkish Association of Judges, called Yarsaf, I don't even know what it means in Turkish, but Murat Aslan, he was the chairperson, president, and he's in jail now for 10 years. And at his final plea at the court in Turkey, he had to plead for himself because his lawyers were not allowed to speak anymore. And he said, I am paying the price for not bowing down or submitting, and for not remaining silent against injustices. But as a Turkish poet, Nazim Hikmet, said, it's not important to be held captive or become a prisoner of war. It's important not to surrender. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much once again. And yeah, see you at the writing booth, hopefully.